Welcome to another episode of The Perspective with the Rayven, where we have real conversations about the journey and how our personal experiences have shaped our perspective on life and the way we see the world.
If you're just pursuing only money, you can end up missing out on fulfillment. But if you are passionate about adding value to your society, creating value, finding, like you said, the loopholes where you can contribute in a way that, and I like what you said about you, I call it you've been specially graced for, because everybody has what they've been specially graced for. One thing I learned from that experience was if you look around you and you're passionate about something, right, and you don't see it, you can create. We all have that thing inside of us to create something.
Welcome to another episode of The Perspective with the Raven, where we have real conversations about the journey and how our personal experiences have shaped our perspective on life and the way we see the world. Today, I'm with a very, very special lady. Her name is Rachel
Yeah. Yes.
Nsefik-Eyo. I had to really think about that name.
Yeah.
But she's a very amazing lady. She's a lawyer, social entrepreneur, and a wellness advocate. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that a word for it?
Mental health educator.
Mental educator. She's also the founder of Tevik
Yeah.
Consulting, legal firm in Abuja.
Yeah.
Do 360 legal stuff. So she's your girl, anything legal. But what I really admire about her is her work with Ziva Wellness. Right. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So,
I'm excited.
All right. So we always have a lot of amazing conversations behind the scenes. I think I met you formally when we were working on the mental health bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was such an interesting time.
Yeah.
But I just warn you, she's a very intense lady. So be intense in a good way.
Yeah.
Intense in a good way. Like the things she believes in, she's very passionate about them, and she has a way about going about them. So today, she's going to be walking us through. So I would want to start with Ziva Wellness and your journey in the mental health space.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Okay, so that's one question that I get asked a lot.
Of course.
Like why mental health? Why mental health? And basically, what are you trying to do? So, with Ziva Wellness, it's a mental health education organization where we, facilitate mental health education learning sessions, at different societal levels, for different audiences in Nigeria. So schools, organizations where we teach people about mental health, basically, what mental health is, what it is not, and just debunking some myths about mental health, mental illnesses and disorders, and basically also trying to eliminate the stigma that is often associated with that. And remember, like you said, we had that thing together where we worked on, the mental health bill and just pushing for that to become law. And for me, I think it's really personal because when I was in uni, this was like maybe close to 15 years ago, and I remember struggling with my mental health and having some mental health challenges. And at the time, it wasn't really something that was talked about in Nigeria. In fact, once you mention mental health or you mention mental, it's like you're crazy. Next minute, everybody's like, Yaba left, and so nobody wanted to talk about that. And I just remember struggling on my own. And, I would have some conversations with some people and I found that they were also struggling, but it's like nobody wanted to say it. Yeah. Nobody wanted to talk about it outside of, the hostels. Everybody was just keeping it hush hush, and for me, I felt a lot of pressure academic wise and I didn't know how to balance, my mental health with academic pressure and, just trying to maybe live with a grade that I came into the university saying, okay, I'm going to graduate with this. And then, I struggled with a lot of anxiety. I struggled at some point. I also struggled with depression. I had some suicidal thoughts, and these were not things that were being talked about then. In fact, you couldn't even, because Nigeria is also such a religious setting. So you're definitely not going to talk about that in church. You're not going to talk about it with anybody. And so along the line, thankfully, I was able to, scale through that and just and even if I studied law and then I started working at the law firm, I would volunteer with mental health organizations. And that's kind of how we met with our work in mental health. And I noticed that, while everybody was advocating for, okay, yeah, the mental health bill, and then also improving quality of access or mental health care in Nigeria, I noticed that, we're doing all this advocacy, but people don't even know what mental
Yeah.
health is. Let's even
Yes.
start from there,
Because from the basics.
from the basics. Like, so when you ask, you get perspectives from people. Like, so when you hear the word or mental or the phrase mental health, what is it? They're like, I've heard so many things that are not
They're not.
mental health. And I think for me, that just made it like, it's like, no, we need to fill this knowledge gap first before we start even talking about mental health care. Because if you can have all the facilities in the world for mental health care and you have all the best practitioners, but people don't understand what mental health is and why you should access care or why it's important for you to take care of your mental health, then it's kind of dicey. So I think just interacting with people in the community and understanding, okay, yes, we need to fill this knowledge gap, and in that way you're reducing stigma, because I realize that people tend to criticize what they don't
Of
understand.
course.
Yes, or they tend to, blow it out of proportion and have a lot of myths about what they don't understand. So if we can get basic mental health education to people, to the average Nigerian, where he understands that, look, your mental health is different from a mental illness. It's your state of well-being, and this is what you can do to take care of yourself, then that's great. And in that way, we're going to like eliminate the stigma
The stigma.
on it. So that's why I'm very passionate
Passionate
about
about it.
it. Yeah, because
No, but
it's
like,
like personal to
no, I,
me.
no, I
So
love that. I love
yeah.
that because like one of the things that you said is like you cannot really address something you haven't properly identified.
Yeah,
So for
very
you,
true.
like I'm hearing that like you realize that you wanted to shorten that knowledge gap.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
where Ziva Wellness comes from.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I know like also from your profile, like you've done a lot of courses, a lot of training as well. Do you want to walk us through that, like the journey of
Yeah, so
educated? Because like the educator has to be educated.
exactly. So, I said, I mean, I was originally trained
Yeah.
as a lawyer, but it
Right.
was interesting because from my second year of uni, I did a course in psychology. I think that was the first, like, let me call it
Eye-opening
encounter.
experience.
Yes, and I
Yes.
was like,
Yes.
I really love this, and I love, just understanding the way the human mind works, and just more about mental well-being. And then I graduated from that. Then as I was working in the law firm, I was then taking courses. So I took a psychology course with University of Oxford. It was really amazing. It was an online course
Saw that.
for 3 months. And then I had a couple of other basic mental health trainings. I was so excited to learn, more about mental health, mental well-being, even introduction to mental health first aid. How do you respond to somebody who is going through a mental health
So
challenge, especially if you're the first responder on the scene? What do you do? What do you say? And so a lot of these courses have been very exciting. I know even the World Health Organization, they did one about, legal rights when it comes to mental health and legal rights. And that was an amazing
that was like
combination for me because it's
you felt right
exactly,
at home there.
yes, that was just in the middle for me. So, I mean, and I'm still taking courses, I'm still learning, especially as I'm now going fully into mental health education. I'm excited to take courses on teaching, curriculum development, because that's the next phase of where we're going to with Ziva Wellness. Being able to work with schools and with communities on how we can develop mental health curriculum for the young ones, for adults, and basically just maybe even pitch that to the government. I'll be like, okay, this can
This
be adapted in school when you're talking about health education. Instead of just focusing only on physical health education, how can we incorporate that to health education? So it's very exciting because I'm
no,
learning new things. Yeah,
I can tell like
I'm
it's something
learning
you're
new
very
things.
passionate
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
But like to be honest, it's like the first time I encountered your brand was online and it was your book club kind of thing. And like I was really intrigued for about how passionate you were about like reading. So like where did you get to a point where you wanted to build a community about it? Because I know that like your book one, I met your sister once and she told me how much you stress her in the family. always,
Because of
always
the
being the
book.
intelligent
Oh
one.
my
So
gosh.
how did you get to a point where you wanted to build a community around
Yeah, yeah, yeah. From primary school, people always used to call me Efiko. I
that?
didn't even really know what that meant, but I've always loved to read. I think I got that from my mom
Mm,
because, well, I was born into the generation where, at the time when I was younger, there were no phones like
true.
that. I remember having to go with my dad to the night office to make calls. So, I mean, yes. So there were no phones, and then my mom had so many books around the house, and I loved reading. I love the way it expands your imagination,
Yeah.
and it just makes you imagine a world that doesn't exist, but then it becomes so real to you, right? And then for non-fiction books, for example, I love the lessons that I learned from people's lives and just how I'm able to gain knowledge and understanding, and I don't have to experience certain negative things because somebody has already lived that life and they're saying, okay, this is what you can do to avoid that. And so I think in 2018, I then I was reading like I don't even know what, and also I was younger. I
Like on
had
average,
time.
how many books do you read like a year?
Then I could read like I was reading like maybe 7 books a week. Like yeah,
7 books a
yes,
week.
I was always with a book. Like I could literally finish a book in one sitting. I could stay up to 3 a.m.
Just reading.
reading a book. Now that I'm an entrepreneur. No,
No time. You gotta make that money.
like but then like I was at the law firm, so I could read. Maybe when I go to court and I'm waiting for my case, I would just be reading all through. Like I'm just lost in it. And every time I finish reading a book, I don't know, for book lovers, when you finish reading a book that is very dramatic, you just want to talk about
You
it.
just want
And that's the
like,
truth. You want to be like, you want to look at the next person
who
and be
else
like,
can
who
share
else
this
can I,
experience with
like,
you?
did you just read what I just read? And then I'll look around and then I'm like, no, there's nobody. I don't know what to say. I have to keep quiet. And then afterwards, like in the office, I would share something. I'm like, oh, have you read this book? And then I saw that there were some people in
They were
my office then
interested.
that were interested. And then I looked around, I was Googling, I'm like, book club community. I didn't really see many then. And I'm like, I think a question just came to my mind was, okay, you can't find what you're looking for. Why don't you create
Create
it?
it.
And so I asked a couple of friends, I'm like, would you guys be interested in coming to a cafe to come and talk about a book that you've read? And they're like, oh, yeah, I love that. And then we had our first meeting. I'll never forget. It was August 2018. I think it was 4th of August. And then we're like 8 or 9 that were there. And we're just talking about our reading goals, getting to know each other. So some of them were my
It's
friends.
already.
One guy was literally somebody who he's in Abuja here. I met him as I was jogging on the street, and we just started talking. And the next thing we realized we loved books, and then he came for the book club meeting. And then at the cafe, there was another guy who was just sitting not too far off. And then when we started, he just came to us and he's like, "Oh, what's going on here?" Like, "Oh, it's a book club." He's like, "I love to read too." And then he joined us.
Wow.
He has been a member till today, like a very
Wow.
consistent member. And so a lot of them, I've known them for at least 6 years, and we've been running for at least 6 years, and it's been so fantastic. And one of the things I love about that is the fact that we've been able to create a community,
Yeah, that's
a
what I see.
bond. We've had friendships. In fact, we've had people who came. Well, maybe they knew themselves a little bit before they came, but they've gotten married, and it's
Wow.
like I'm telling you,
So
like
you're trying to
people
take
have.
credit for that.
Yeah, and that's why I said maybe they knew themselves, but I just hushed over it. I'm like, yeah, maybe. I think it's our book club that did that.
That did
But
that.
it's just been an amazing community, and just having where you can read, you can grow. Something why I love reading is because of the different perspectives. Even if it's a fiction book that you read, by the time you start discussing the themes, you get to see life through another person's eyes.
Yeah.
You have your own views about what you think about what happened in a book. For example, you're like, no, I feel like this man shouldn't have done this. And then somebody will be like, well, maybe the
He
reason
did
why
it.
he did this. And you're like, oh, I never really thought about that. So you're able to exchange ideas, you're able to have enlightening conversations. Of course, it helps with your vocabulary as well.
Of
You're
course.
able to
You like
present.
English.
You
You love it.
so like you're able to present yourself well, and I think for me that community has just been and for me it's more quality over quantity. I didn't really want a book club where we have 100 members, nobody knows themselves, people come for book club meet, you're pressing your phone, you're not even interested. I always wanted to keep it intimate and small, and we've had really great consistent members, and our community bond has gone beyond reading books. I mean, we've had people who have had different things, and we've attended their ceremonies, their music concerts for the first time. Like we're there for
We're
each
there for each
other.
other.
So it's just been an amazing journey. But me, one thing I learned from that experience was if you look around you and you're passionate about something, right, and you don't see it, you can create. We all have that thing inside of us to create something. And when you see, well, I mean, like, look at what you're
I
doing.
knew you were gonna hit me with that. I knew you were
I
gonna
was going to
hit
go
I knew you were gonna
and
hit me
look
with
at
that.
what this podcast is, right? It's like this came from something that you
Yeah.
thought about and you conceptualized it, and then it's been implemented. So you look around and you want something out there, you don't see it, you can create
You can
it.
create yourself.
And you'll be surprised at how many people would ride on it, because a lot of people are always like, what if it fails? What if it doesn't work? But it's always exciting to create something and see it come
No,
to
I love it.
fruition.
And
So
I love
yeah,
Mike,
that's
you dropped a lot of really, really nice points. One of the things that I just wanted to add as well is like you're talking about how reading and you can
yeah,
get perspective from it.
yeah.
There's one quote that really kind of changed my life in some capacity. It talks about like experience, how experience is the best teacher, but sometimes your own personal experience might be too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? The
Yeah,
cost implications of it
yeah,
and like the feeling from it might be too
yeah.
expensive. So having the opportunity to learn from someone else's experiences kind of shortens that gap.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
And to be honest, it's like I enjoy reading, and I remember as a kid, my mom she's a teacher. She became a principal and retired. But as a kid, one of the things she'll tell us
Oh, my
is
mom was also a teacher
yeah,
too.
see, it's one of the things we have in common
Yeah.
as well. So she would say, "Oh, Jack boy, if you this is so random, right? So if you farted around the house, just like, you know what, go to the toilet, sit down on that seat and read a book. Yeah.
Oh my God.
That was the
Oh
punishment.
my goodness,
And
that's
so,
funny.
but I felt like it was punishment as a
Yeah.
kid, and I was just like, like, and one of the things I learned about it is even before I was traveling consciously, reading kind of exposed me,
Yes,
right?
yes.
I have a cousin of mine who reads a lot, and I remember one time I was in the UK and I was telling him about a place that I was, and he's never been to the UK at the time. But he was like, "Oh, go by this street, go by." I was like, "How do you know that?" It's like I read about it.
Right,
I was just like,
yes,
"That is
yes.
so amazing."
Yes,
So
yes.
people kind of underestimate the importance of
Yeah.
it. I personally have had some books that have changed my perspective in general, but then obviously I'm sure I'm nowhere near
No, I
you.
know there's one that you've read that we've both read.
Which one is it?
Is it is it The Mastery of Self? No.
Yeah, we've
What?
kind of. I probably read most of the books that I've read,
Yeah,
but I just
true.
wanted to ask you,
True.
right? Which books have really shaped you?
Mm,
Like just a few, and just
yeah.
maybe two, right? And why, and what they did to your psyche.
Okay, so I think, of course, the most powerful one, because one of the most important things about my life is my faith.
Okay.
So I'll say the Bible. That's
Okay.
the first
That's the
one.
first one.
Definitely changed the way I saw life, and not just reading it like in quote a storybook, but reading it to gain understanding, reading it to gain light, reading it to gain revelation, and it really just shaped the way I am as a person, like the things that I believe about myself, what I say about myself, and how I view the world, how I view certain situations and circumstances. So while other people may be seeing obstacles, or I'm seeing opportunities, and it's been a journey because I wasn't
It
always
was
this
like,
way.
okay.
So I feel, that in depth going into it really helped me understand more about myself and just about the world. And I think the second one would be The Four Agreements.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
book
Yeah.
that we've
That's the one.
read.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Four
That's a dope
Agreements
one.
will always be one of my
You
top
can read it
books.
over and over again.
Oh my goodness. I have it like literally on my bedside. And I try to read it at the beginning of every year. And it's just such a powerful book. And it's so small, but it's so,
So yeah.
profound. One of the things I'll never forget that the Four Agreements he said was when people speak words, they are just projecting themselves, their thoughts, and their perspectives onto you. You don't have to
To accept
accept
it.
it.
Yeah.
You can form your own reality, right? If somebody is scared or somebody is afraid of something, usually, or maybe you come with a business idea and you share it with someone, and the person feels like, are you sure you can do this? In this Nigeria, nobody is going to, there's no money, things are hard. And it's like that's their perspective
Right.
because of their own reality.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people don't really know the difference between their reality and what could be somebody else's reality. And so they try to project. And if you're not careful, you could imbibe somebody else's reality and make it your own. So you who was very courageous, who was brave, who was ready to, enter into a new opportunity, and then you go and meet the wrong person and they crush your
Just crush
dreams.
your dreams.
And before you know it, it's like, oh, this is not really going to work. And sometimes I think about how many crushed dreams in this life there are, things that never really came to light because somebody shared it with the wrong
Wrong
person.
person.
Yeah, so it's like when people speak, you have to always be careful and you filter it through your
Your
own
own.
reality. So I think those two books have really
Yeah.
changed the way I,
No,
I
no.
see life. Yeah.
To be honest, like I like what you said. Like the Four Agreements, like another book for me, and I think someone asked me, and it's like, Jack, I see like you talk a lot, and you strike me as being very particular about your words. And I said, like, before I read the book, I'd always been that way. But then reading the book,
Yeah.
the first one that says be impeccable with your words, say what you mean, and the power of words in the creation process, you know what I mean? It just changed it for me.
Yeah.
Because obviously, like working in communication, I see that like it's important to use your words widely. And I see how sometimes marketing communication, which also helped me with mental health as well, how marketing communication can put pressure on people, undue pressure. So I like that. I like that. For me, another book that changed my life too is Conversations with God, by an
Also,
author, Donald Neil Walsh.
oh,
And
do you have the book? I'm going to take it from
yes,
you.
yes. It's definitely a must read.
Oh, that's awesome.
But then it's an audiobook that I listen to. But
Okay.
how the book starts is about this guy, and he's been asking questions, right? Having questions about faith, religion, life. He feels like he's a failure. And then he starts to ask questions, he starts to get answers back. According to his interpretation, it was God speaking to him.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
And it broke down certain things where he talked about how at the end of the day is we have the power to create our world. And by
Very
when they say
true.
you're created in God's image and likeness,
Yeah.
is in terms of three things, right? Not really in our physical form, right? But just in terms of being able to think, conceive an idea, right? And think it,
Yeah.
right? And by actions bring it to life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it just kind of unburdened me a bit because I always felt that I felt helpless a lot in certain areas of my life. I felt I didn't have any power, or I couldn't, or I had to rely on something outside myself. But what reading that book did to me is it taught me a level of accountability for my
Yeah.
life, where
Yeah.
I can think of something,
Yeah.
I can speak it, and
Yeah.
I can bring it to life.
Yeah.
And just to bring to the podcast as well is
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it. I've been wanting to do it, but then I
You're
said to
giving it a round
myself,
of
I
applause.
said it was my birthday, and I said, you know what, let me give this for myself, right? And honestly, an amazing journey so far,
And just
and
to say that honestly, you're doing really great. Because I mean, I love to give people their flowers
I appreciate
because
that. I appreciate
you're
that.
doing amazing. Because remember when you just call for something, and we're like, oh, let me just find out this, and
Yes,
then we
yeah,
end up talking like 2 hours on all of these things. And I really like the fact that you had very unique perspectives. And I'm so passionate about men, especially Nigerian men,
Yeah.
because I'm always like Nigerian men and their mental health. Please speak to somebody.
Okay.
But I always like when men, have very unique perspectives and they're bold in, sharing their voices and just being intentional with the words that they speak, words that heal the community, words that encourage people to think in a certain way that is uplifting and positive. And I love what you're really doing about, changing the narrative of of just Africa in general and what, Nigeria could be and the people in it. So I need you to know that what you're doing is not a small feat. It's like really amazing. So
Thank you,
it's
thank you.
like,
I don't know about that, but I'm grateful. You know what I mean? I feel it's important for us to play our roles,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I got to a point where I realized I can't complain if I'm not putting in my own efforts.
Right.
I shouldn't even complain because at the end of, like, one of the things that you said that I picked up as well is if you see a loophole, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like part of how the universe works that it will put your ability to see that loophole.
Very true.
And if you can see it, there's a chance that you have what it takes to be able to fill that gap, right? So I think I got to a point where I stopped looking. But also, I think one of my life-changing experience was the time we're working together on the mental health bill. Is one of the most fulfilled I felt in my life.
Yeah,
I remember when
that's
that when it
amazing.
was passed, I was just like,
Yeah.
oh my
Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
And that is such an amazing thing. So
Yeah.
I see that you do a lot of work in different capacity, like, and there's a sense of fulfillment that you get. So I wanted to find out from you, is like, I see the way that you're passionate about yourself. It's like, how do you find fulfillment? Where do you find fulfillment?
Yeah. So for me, like, and I know that you had also asked, like, well, what does that look like to me? So yeah, for me, so when I was working at the law firm and I was getting to like my fifth year, I think I started having this burden right in me that okay, I know that I was made for more. I mean, as at the time I was working as a lawyer and I was still doing volunteer work, but I realized that I was very fulfilled when I was doing a lot of volunteer work, even more than that. And I still love law, but I think for me, I just started asking myself, like, what am I really here on earth for? And the thing about fulfillment is that, like you said, you can have all the money in the world, but if you're doing something that you're not, how do I put it now, put on this earth to do, you will not have that fulfillment and you will always be restless. And so for me, I had to take a step back when I wanted to go into the next phase of my life and just ask myself, so what do I want to do with this next phase? What does success look like for me? Not what the world says success looks like. Because that was one of the most defining factors in my life where I sat down and asked myself, what does success look like to me? And, just to give a little, because it's very personal, but I mean, just to give a glimpse, because that was also tied to fulfillment. Like, if I am successful, every day, right, I feel fulfilled. And that was my own personal definition. So if I'm able to impact somebody positively, if I'm able to encourage somebody, at least one person, if I'm able to drop a single drop like in the mighty ocean, if it's my work in mental health education, and I'm able to talk to one person about what mental health is, and I see the shift in perspective in their faces, and they're like, and then they start asking questions, and they're saying, oh, so how can I help a family member who is doing this, who is doing that? Oh, where can I find resources? Where can I? For me, that's what fulfillment looks like, being able to have that positive impact in the society. And I find that money always pursues value. So if you're just pursuing only money, you can end up missing out on fulfillment. But if you are passionate about adding value
Creating
to your
value.
society, creating value, finding, like you said, the loopholes where you can contribute in a way that, and I like what you said about you, I call it, you've been specially graced for, because everybody has what they've been specially graced for. It's the way you do your branding and marketing that nobody can do it like you. You have been specially graced for that, right? So it's a case of, if you find that niche and you say, okay, this is what I've been graced to do, you find fulfillment where you're able to impact lives positively. And so for me, fulfillment looks like every day when I wake up, I'm walking in alignment with God's will for my life. I am seeking direction from God on what I need to do, on how I need to take the next steps across all my business enterprises. So whether it's my legal consultancy firm, whether it's with Ziva Wellness, whether it's with Renewed, which is like the positive affirmation brand, I am constantly in tune with God. And so from there, I'm getting direction, I'm getting guidance, I'm getting peace, I'm getting joy. And then I'm able to come out into the world as my best self, encourage other people, uplift people, And for me, that thing about giving of yourself to others is also one of the things I define fulfillment as, rather than just sitting down in your own world and thinking, oh, this is not working out for me. Why is everything going wrong? It's like, even if you stepped out of yourself for a second and you realized, I have so much to give others, there's so much fulfillment that comes from giving. And it's very interesting because the world works in such a wholesome way that the more you give, the more you receive. So as you create value, right, you're able to even make money. And the total, it's what they call ikigai. It's like you find your ikigai is like what you're good at, what you can make money from. And I think the third one is what people want from you, or something like that. So it's like a total full circle moment, right, where you're able to find that niche. So that's what fulfillment looks like. And for me, it's like an everyday thing. It's not a destination, it's not an accomplishment, it's not an achievement, it's not what the world defines success. It's not numbers for me. It's not applause. It's not my social media following. It's not, money. So for me, and that's why it's very sustainable, because none of those things, finish. Yeah.
Wow. No, but
Yeah.
like, Rachel, always ready to drop. But then when you were speaking, I just started to relive a personal experience of mine as well. Is I'll just start with this one first. I had a couple of things that I
And
thought,
then
but
afterwards, you tell me what fulfillment is for
oh
you.
yeah, of
Yeah.
course. I love that. So I remember before I went off to work on my own, before this guy, the Raven, was born, I was working as a national sales and marketing manager for a multinational, and in terms of my life, that was where I wanted to be. Like the way when I was looking at my career projection, I'd gone there earlier than I thought I would, and I remember getting that job, and I was like, finally, right? 6 months into the job, I felt so disillusioned.
Wow.
I felt like, I think one of the first feelings I had is it was the most money I've ever earned, and I was a senior manager, the youngest in the management group. I was the only Nigerian there as well. And like I remember one of my friends coming to my office, I was like, "Oh, you've made it."
Wow.
And I like him saying those words made me feel very unhappy. I don't know why. Because I started to think to myself, it's like I felt like I was being paid to limit myself. And that is such a scary feeling. And I remember because where I was working is like we had like corporate attires that we wear. And for like a month, I couldn't wear it to the office. I remember every morning I'll wake up and I'll have to have a conversation to myself to get up and go to bed. And then I had a stiff neck. And I knew it wasn't because of the way that I was sleeping. So I wake up one morning and I think it was Etel, then I was trying to port my line or something and I was having issues. So I don't know why when I waking up, I just knew that was my last day there.
Wow.
And I just knew I couldn't continue like this. I felt like I was living a lie. Do you know what I mean? I was able to do much more with money, but then I was also spending my money in a way that was hurting me. Because I feel like there's a way that your mind works that like you get defensive
Yeah.
Because especially when the journey of making the money is not fulfilling, the
Mm.
way you consume it is destructive.
Ah.
And that's what I've
Deep.
learned.
Yeah.
And so that's what was happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into the office one day, and the HR guy calls me and he's like, "What is happening? That I'm having issues with the boss." And I said, to be honest, we have ideological differences because I do not feel comfortable doing the things that he's telling me to do.
Mm.
And I do not want to continue. It's like, so what do you want to do? It's like, do you want to resign? If you resign, you won't get anything. I said, what can you do for me? He said, you know what, just pack your things, we'll just work out something. And I just got off. And time I was like a manager, and I had like people working in different parts of the country, but I didn't say a word to them. But then I remember just leaving there. It's like my neck stopped hurting.
Wow.
And I just realized at that point is, if I was going to ever do this, because I love communication, I love marketing, but I felt like I was doing communication in a way that I was exploiting people. So when I was going to do my business, I was going to do business from a consumer centric perspective. Because something you said as well is, you talked about like how money follows value. And so me, my own thought process, if you're able to communicate value from a consumer centric perspective and communicate it effectively enough, money will never be your issue. So that has been my drive to create the business and work with people. So when I approach customers, I tell them, you know what, I'm not going to do certain things for you. If that's what you want, I'm not your guy. And yeah, and I feel so much peace. So it's not about money for me. I want to believe like I've been blessed in a way. So you said something as well about grace, and about how grace is like your fulfillment is tied to grace. And in terms of filling that loophole, what grace do you have? I remember one time I was talking to an older friend of mine, and I was saying that, this my packaging is putting me in trouble because my helpers, right? My helpers would think that I don't need help. And he said to me, that is grace. I was like, bro, calm down. This guy is just giving us that. But he said, do you know what grace is? Grace will suggest that you don't look like where you're coming from or where you are, but where you're going to. Because for you to be able to walk into those doors that you belong in eventually, you have to look like them. So don't feel bad or feel some type of way for looking like where you're going. I was like,
That's
that's deep. Do you know what I mean? And so now it's like people will look at me and think like, oh, I have everything figured out. And maybe I do, maybe I don't. But then for me, fulfillment is knowing that like I can create value.
yeah.
And like my value is not tied to anybody's perception.
Exactly.
My value is tied to the belief that I have that like is something you said as well. Like even if I'm touched by one or whatever I do touches one person,
Yes.
that is enough.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Fulfillment is knowing that like I can have a conversation that like at the end of it, both of us leave this conversation feeling like,
Yes.
oh,
Yes.
this was good.
Yeah.
Fulfillment for me is, before fulfillment for me used to have something to do with Manchester United, but those guys have broken my heart so
Oh
much.
my goodness. You
So-
can't even. You can't. Well, at least it's not Arsenal. So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Sorry.
Then, but fulfillment for me is just, and I think one of the things that I'm grateful for is being able to wake up in the morning and decide for myself what it is I want to do, how I want to do.
Yeah.
And then I feel, and that's what it is for me. So I'm so grateful to be able to do the things that I do. So like talking about like fulfillment and like work and all these things is like, I'm so intrigued. Like you wear many hats. And like a lot of times when you've gone on podcasts and stuff or interviews, one of the things you tell people is that like I wear many hats.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked about your wellness.
Yeah.
We've talked about your mental health aspect. We've talked about your passion for book reading, capacity building. Let's talk about the legal part of things.
Yeah.
Right. Talk us through your business. What is it called to start with?
Yes, it's Nsefik Legal. It's a
yeah.
legal consultancy firm, and we specialize mostly in corporate commercial law.
Okay.
I'm also, I mean, I think my experience as a lawyer, I really love law. To be
Yeah.
honest, I love law. Sometimes I wonder which one I love more. I think, I think I enjoy, mental wellness, but law is really exciting. Because you can find yourself in different industries and still add value. Like everybody in life needs a lawyer. Like
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
care what industry you're
Yeah,
in,
you need
you need a
legal.
lawyer. In
Yeah.
fact, everybody who is a business person has a lawyer.
Yeah.
So think about it. So it's like no matter where you find yourself or if you connect with people, you're always able to add value from the legal perspective. And so we do like, like I said, mostly corporate commercial. I also have exciting experience with litigation, especially when I was in the firm, but I don't do litigation as much
Would
anymore.
you say you've
But
outgrown that? Is that what it
Not
is?
necessarily. I think
Okay.
I just chose to
Okay.
focus
Okay.
on
It's more of a
corporate
focus.
commercial.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it's more
Okay.
just like specializing on corporate commercial and other things that are related to it. So like IP, real estate,
Okay.
agreements, contract negotiation, contract drafting, and legal documentation and things like that. So that's what I've always really liked. Even company secretarial work as well. So we have clients that were able to cater to these particular needs from. I mean, it doesn't mean that if tomorrow somebody came with like a good brief for litigation, I'll be like, I haven't outgrown that.
So
No.
when you say
I mean,
fulfillment can go out the window for the
yeah,
check.
yeah, 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 yeah. Especially for legal, I'm like, yeah, leave
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
But definitely, we'll get it done. We'll get it done. But it's really exciting just to be able to, because we have clients from like different
Yeah.
backgrounds and different work that they do. But just being able to be there for them, give them that advice, and just add value to their business. It's almost like you're a part of it, especially for those who are startups or are just growing and they need some form of legal advice. It's always very exciting, and I feel like the training that I got at the law firm was just second to none because it is such an excellent law firm, and the level of excellence there when it comes to quality of output of work is amazing. And so that has really just helped me even as I've been on my own with my partner. That's my the law firm partner, and just like working through a lot of the work that we do. And that's why we're able to guarantee excellent output of work. So it's been great. Yeah,
No, I love
it
it. I
has.
love it now because to be honest, it's like before I started my business, I didn't see law as important, right? I've been in some very dicey situations because I did not go the legal route,
And
right?
because you didn't know the difference between shall and may
Yes, yes,
in
yes,
in an
yes, yes.
agreement.
First thing is like, so as a communication person, like I'm particular about words, but
Yes.
in a communication sense. But then I feel like for law, what it teaches you is in terms of interpretation,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that is such a
Yes.
beautiful thing.
Yes.
Is because when I hear you speak, is like also maybe reading the book as
Good
well
books.
for
Yeah.
helped you
Yeah.
with you're very impeccable with your words, and I'll
Oh,
give you that for
thank
sure.
you.
Like you use
Thank
your
you.
words very well. You're very intentional with them.
Thank you.
But then like, how has that shaped the way you communicate in your personal life? Like this, because I know sometimes it's like it's easy to talk about it from a corporate professional perspective, but then how about on a personal perspective? Like have you applied the use and the meaning of words and being impeccable in your words and
Yeah, so I think for me, like in my personal life, it's been a very interesting journey because there was a time in my life where I wasn't impeccable with my words and I didn't really know the weight or the value of what my words could do. I didn't really understand how deeply it could shape my life or my perspective on life or situations. But I think over the years, as I have grown, as I've evolved, as I've spent time doing a lot of introspecting, one of my favorite things to do is journaling. And I'm a journaling advocate.
yeah,
I talk about journaling, and I'm not talking about journaling on your phone. I mean using
the
pen to
that
paper, like
traditional
the traditional journaling of writing down your thoughts, looking into your emotions, your feelings at every given time, your perspective on certain things that have happened, why you believe that that is the perspective on that particular situation. I think that has, over time, it has taught me about the intentionality of the words that I speak. And I feel like my faith has also played a big role. I know we talked about me reading the Bible and how that has shaped me. I think also understanding from a spiritual aspect of the power of your words. A lot of people have different ways they call it. Some people call it manifesting, some people call it, oh, when you speak things into the universe. It's like, but everything is all
or
gotten
you call
from.
it affirmation. I follow your
Exactly.
your words.
People have different. I'm a big believer of positive
Yeah.
affirmations, and how it helps to improve your mental well-being, and how when you speak words, and you see, it's all tied to biblical principles, because even spiritually, some people call it confessions, people call it declarations. There are different words for it, but it's the same thing. It's just the intentionality of the words that you speak. So for me, I'm now at the stage, and I'm still growing, where I realize how, even down to the a random joke, I realize how important
Yeah.
it is. I kid you not, I could just be at home and then I'll say something like, well, I beg these people now. That's how they will now just go and take the electricity. Next minute, lights off. It's so weird. Like,
Yeah.
it's down to the most random things,
Yeah.
So I realized that I have to be very intentional. It's still something that I'm learning, something that I'm working on, because sometimes when certain things happen, the first thing you want to say is something negative. Or
Right.
when you're having a conversation with someone, it just seems right in quote to just flow with the conversation, and the conversation is
Yes,
negative
like
and
you
people are
could.
just saying, oh, this is how this country is, or everything is hard, and then you're like, oh, but just learning that my words have so much power and I need to be intentional about that. So even in the mornings, if I wake up in the morning and I'm feeling some type of way, not particularly motivated, I was telling my friend yesterday, I said, I literally tell myself, like, when you speak it out, I'm like, nope, this is a good day. Today is going to be
Nip it in the
productive.
bud.
Today is going to be amazing. I'm ready to get this. I'm going to, and it ends up being an amazing and productive day. But that might not have been how I woke up in the first 2 minutes. But I
You.
basically like speak what I want to see into being. And I think I have also tried as much as possible to like do that with my friends. When it comes to communicating with them, the people who are closest to me, I always make sure that even with jokes, you can't speak negative words into me. You can't speak. I'm always very protective about that, and I'm a little bit more vocal about that now. Before I would just keep quiet and be like, oh, it was just a
Yeah.
joke. But now I'm, learning how important it is to not only control the words I speak, but even the words around me, the people who are closest to me. What kind of words are they speaking into my life? If they're not speaking words that are uplifting me or making me feel better, because I will speak words that are
Yeah.
uplifting them and making them
But
feel
you're
better.
intentional
So
about your words.
exactly. So I need them to also, that's something that I need. And if I cannot get that, then the dynamics of that relationship would have to change. Because imagine spending a lot of time with somebody who always complains,
Debbie Downer.
always speaks negative about you to you or about a situation. It tends to affect you. So words are really powerful, and that's just been my
No, like
journey. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. It's just another thing that I just wanted to add to what you said is about like words are powerful, but then there's a deeper layer to words where we talk about feelings, right? And I remember a number of books I've read. One of the things that they would point to is the fact that like if you want to really know the direction to go, you would feel it in your guts. Right. So if it's something positive, there's a way that you have like the phrase for it's like butterflies in your tummy kind of thing. But then if it's negative, you feel like your tummy is churning and whatever. So I also know is words kind of initiate feelings. Right. So the words you say to yourself can initiate a certain kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And I like what you said about like being very intentional about so because I generally one of my school of thought is that like the world is shaped by stories, right? And stories are formed by words and phrases, right? So how do you have to one of the most important stories is the stories that you say and accept about yourself.
Very true.
Right. So like who do you and I had a personal experience growing up where they were saying like everyone just thought about me as a spoiled kid, mommy's boy. I wasn't those things. But in not addressing it, it seeped into my subconscious and I started to create that reality for myself. There was an experience where my life changed. And I always say the story. It was we're about to go to school. It was the end of graduation, a graduation period, and I was about to go, and I was in front of the mirror, getting ready, and and at that point, it's like I already knew I'd failed in school, so I wasn't too keen. And a friend of mine comes, ah, Jaffa, why are you wasting time in front of the mirror? You'll be fine, boy, now. And I said, I bet leave me. That's all I have going for me. I was like, oof. Never heard this word before. Never said this words to myself before. But then that came from so deep.
Yeah.
And then I realized, and that's where this whole quest to know myself, because I just realized I only knew the physical version of me and the version of people that people saw. And I said to myself, oh my God, do you know what I mean? Like, is this really who I am? Is this really how I see myself? And then it made me more intentional about what I let people say about me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he was sipping to your subconscious. Yeah. So, wow, Rachel, this has
That's
been really, really intense. You know what I mean? I really enjoyed talking to you. But before we go, right? I know I told you it was a game that we're gonna play.
Yeah.
It's called the Cards of Thoughts. I'm just gonna
Okay.
pop it out. You know what I mean? It's thought-provoking questions from a game called the Card of Thoughts. So I'm gonna shuffle so that it's fair. Some of the questions might feel a bit intrusive, but like you shared a lot today, so so I guess you're already primed for it. You've had the foreplay for it. You know what I mean? So you're ready. So we'll just split it in two. Let your spirit lead, however you want to pick. Right. Okay.
So should I read it out?
You read it out, then think about it, then hit us. Says
People versus society. Okay, so this one says, what parts of my identity have been painted by society and which have I created on my own? This is a very interesting question. what parts of my identity have been painted by society? That have been painted by society. Please explain that part. I know the second part of,
Yeah.
and which have I created on my own.
Okay,
What does that?
so I would say maybe the version of you
Mhm.
that like has been shaped by like the work that you do, the space that you work in. So maybe just by being a lawyer, right? What
Exactly.
or like yeah,
Okay, I
but
get
then the
what you
versions
mean.
of you that you walked into with your eyes wide open.
Oh, right,
I
right,
think
right.
that's my own interpretation.
Oh,
But
okay.
however you feel that question is,
Have
whatever
been
it says to you,
painted
just
by
go for it.
society. Yeah, I think maybe when it comes to having painted by society, like in terms of this identity of like, oh, the strong black woman who's
Right,
like,
right.
getting everything together and, just doing her own thing. And I know how you said on the outside, it always looks like I have it all
Yeah.
figured out. So there's that. I feel like there's that. I mean, I am a strong black woman, right? And even if a lot of black women are like, no, no, to me,
Don't worry, but
I am strong, and I mean, to a large extent, I embody like excellence and all of that. And I feel like there's been that thing when it comes to women. So I think even just being a lawyer, being a female lawyer, a lot of times people are like, they like to liken a lot of negative connotations to that. But to be fair, I don't really accept a lot of identity from society.
of
I
course.
like to believe that I have created my own identity, and not even that I've created it. I feel like in my identity, and that's the second part of the question, right? Which have I created on my own? I feel the most important identity that I have is the is the one in God, and how I see myself is the way God sees me, and what I tell myself I am and what I know I am is what God says about me. So, and that's the most important thing. I think I've gotten to the point where I don't really pay too much attention of how society views me. If anything, I want my identity to be that when people look at me, they see Jesus Christ, because my faith is so important to who I am as a
Right.
person, and that's where my identity comes from. And so it's not even necessarily that I have sort of created my own identity. It's just that I've submitted my identity to who God says that I am, and everything that I think about myself is what God thinks of me and says of me. And I like the fact that I got this identity question, because for the longest time it's something that I really struggled with. I struggled with so many. I always saw myself through the lens of what I did, not necessarily who I was. Yeah. So if I was a lawyer, if you asked me, oh, so like who are you? I'll be like, the first thing I'll say is I'm a lawyer, right? Or if I'm in mental wellness, I'm a mental health educator. I've really
You
taken a
put
step
yourself
back.
into
Yes,
boxes.
put myself into boxes. I've really taken a step back, and I've gone on this journey where I asked myself, so if you weren't doing any of these things, who are you? And so that's where my true identity has really shined. And I found that my identity is like a great umbrella to all these other things that
Different
I do.
facets,
Yes. So it's first about who I am, who God has said I am, and then that under that is
All the
where all the
different
things
things
that
that
I
you do.
do. Exactly. So yeah.
Rachel, thank you so much for
Yeah.
being on the perspective, and I hope you've
Thank you,
enjoyed
thank you.
sharing with us.
I had an amazing time.
Thank you
Like
so much.
this
Right.
was so
Thank
good.
you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
All
Thank
right.
you. Well done.